Welcome to Iconic Production Channel. We're doing just a brief stream to discuss a new reveal from Strange Owl Games, kind of give you a preview. But with me is an iconic fan and fellow co-host of the Grand Campaign, Richard. Richard, welcome.
Hey guys, take two. Sorry about a little audio difficulty a minute ago. Yeah, I'm in my home office today, not in James' studio because we had a stomach bug this week
Yeah,
actually. And I'm okay now, but don't wanna spread it around.
yeah.
So
So
yeah.
for people who may be tuning in, by the way, thanks Grum for the technical heads up. Who are you? Where can people find you online? And then we'll get into the big reveal.
Yeah, my name is Richard Rowland. I'm a Germanic philologist, which is the thing that Tolkien did for a living. I don't actually do it for a living. I do it for a passion. I do other boring things for a living, which we won't talk about today. And then additionally, I'm a poet. I'm a writer, and I've been running tabletop games for a long time now. And I think that everyone who starts out running games, not necessarily playing, but anybody who starts out running games eventually becomes a game designer, whether or not it's willing. Some people get sort of drag kicking and screaming. It's funny because we've been friends for years. And for a long time, I'm like, oh, James, he's the game designer. I'm just over here. I'm just staying in my lane, doing my thing. But anyway, I have a fantasy world that I've been working on for the last 20 something years now. It didn't actually start out as a game setting. It was just a fantasy world that I worked on and wrote poetry and stories and everything else in, and um, uh, also just kind of a place where if I had like a linguistic theory or a new form of poetic verse that I was playing around with, or just like an interesting idea about like ritual participation or liturgical theology or something like that, I would basically use this world called the world under starlight as the place to kind of like fiddle around and dabble with things and play with things and try different ideas and concepts out. So it's really grown. It's a story, as Tolkien would say, a story that has grown in the telling over the last 20 years. And several years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, some friends of mine wanted to play in the world. They knew the world, they'd read some of the stories, they wanted to play in them. And so we started gaming in them, originally using one set of rules that I kit bashed together from
Mm-hmm.
actually the One Ring RPG, which was the other big game that I was running at the time. So that was like an easy thing to convert. And that worked well in some ways, not so well in other ways. Specifically, I didn't feel like the way that combat is handled in the One Ring RPG is really cool for a Tolkien story,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't quite what I wanted for this story. And so I was involved in, I think it was a early playtest of
You
the Clash system,
very
and
early playtest.
yeah, the and but also it was after I think you'd finished the book, the Clash rules, but you were still working on the Fall of the Children of Bronze, which
Yeah.
is the grand campaign that's out for Jackals. And so we played through that one year,
Mm-hmm.
a weekend at your house or whatever, and got to the end of it, and I just thought, man, I really like combat in this. This is it's really different from pretty much anything else out there that anyone is doing. As far as like dynamic kind of reactive combat in a tabletop RPG that still moves on pretty quickly. You don't get
Yeah.
bogged down. And so we talked about it, and I started working on a port for Amboria and kind of switched my playgroup over, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And long story short, I mean, this is the problem with you ask me a simple question and you get like a life story. But
Hey, this is great. That's why I'm here for it.
yeah, so long story short, we are going to be publishing the Amboria role-playing game with partnering with Strange Owl Games,
Yep.
and got a Kickstarter that's going to launch what in a couple of weeks, something like
Yeah,
that.
in a couple of weeks, it's gonna be awesome. We've got it all specced out. The books are going to be gorgeous. We're going all out to start, and then stretch goals are just going to make the book cooler. We'll talk about what's coming down the pipe in the Kickstarter, what Richard's plans are, what our plans are. What we've got planned for the Patreon right now. I'm going to put a link up in the chat if you want to find out more about Amboria. First of all, go to strangeowlgames.com. Every month Richard has been posting a blog about Amboria, and he's going to continue to do that for the rest of the year. And if you want to get a sneak peek of all of this, jump over to patreon.com/strange owl games, because that's where Richard every month is posting playtest documents for everyone to enjoy and um, get a little bit of information. And if you
Yeah,
like Jackals, by the way, the magic system, which I've gotten a lot of great feedback from D100 players, that was really inspired by my discussions with Richard about, our the not that we don't enjoy magic in role playing games, but magic in role playing games definitely feels far more Marvel Comics
yep,
than
yep,
historically magical liturgical ritual, engagement with the supernatural. And so,
right. Yeah, no, and that's one of my favorite things, and it's gonna be interesting. We're gonna have a couple of like the more strange ritualist classes that'll be pretty different from anything you've seen even in Jackals.
yeah,
And it'll be really interesting to see the ways that you have these abilities players can use, but they affect the world in like subtle, kind of non-obvious or sometimes non-linear ways. So yeah, pretty excited about that.
yeah. All right, well, let's show off what we came to show off. Bob Crum, who is doing the art for Jackals, which we are very excited about. We'll have more pieces to show off. I'm going to do an interview like this with Bob right before the Kickstarter goes live to show off the pieces that he has created for the Kickstarter. Got us the video. And so we're going to share with you guys the video for the Amboria role playing in the world under starlight. We're just going to jump right into it. So here we go.
Welcome to Amborea, a world 20 years in the making. Strange Owl Games is excited to bring you Amborea, role-playing in the world under starlight. From the mind of Richard Rowland, co-host of the Amansul podcast and Medieval Universal History on the Symbolic World. In Amborea, Richard's deep love of symbolism, poetry, and history meet to offer a gaming experience like none other. In this rich and unique fantasy world, adventurers fight monsters, uncover ancient secrets, and find themselves immersed in the stories and legends of another place and time. As their reputation and influence grows, they find themselves thrust into the crossfire of political machinations in a kingdom on the edge of ruin. Powered by the clash system used in Jackals, Bronze Age fantasy role-playing, Amborea provides fast, intuitive, and reactionary rules for combat, travel, and building your community. The clash system was already famous for its fast and deadly combat. We've taken this dynamic system and integrated the liturgical and poetic depths of the world under starlight directly into the game mechanics. Amborea, role-playing in the world under starlight. Back it today.
Man, that video is awesome.
That's
I especially love the little army that he put in there as you kind of
Yeah,
move into the East.
that was a nice touch.
Yeah. So,
Man, that
so
is
it,
just
I mean, I've shown it to you before. What are like, but this is the first time we've really talked about it. This is a
yeah.
video for your world.
Yeah, it's actually a couple of things that really strike me. One is that it's just really deeply satisfying to see the map
Mm-hmm.
um drawn by somebody else now, right? I've been drawing maps of this world for 2 decades, but to see the map drawn by somebody else and for it to be like a really beautiful um just a map, like, right, but then as the camera is going over the places, I mean, this is a weird thing about a world that you spend a lot of time in, whether it's a game world you've played in for a long time, or it's a story world that you know really well, like Lord of the Rings or something like that, where when you look at a map, you have memories that you actually associate with each of these
Yeah.
different places, memories that were made with your friends, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at them, the flyover the map, I'm like, oh yeah, been there, been there, been there, been there, like I remember this thing that happened there, and I'm hoping, obviously, the goal would be that this is the effect it's going to have on people who get to play in this world, especially since Amboria, as the system is really designed, and you can totally run one shots in it. That's fine, but as a system, as a setting, it's going to really favor kind of the slow burn of a long campaign, and deep engagement with deep investment in the world. And so hopefully by the end of playing through Thunder in the North or whatever, players are gonna get through this, and they're gonna have that same kind of a feeling, right? These will be places they know
Yeah.
and memories that they've made together with their friends. So yeah.
So we've got the core book, and if you theme Jackals, that's kind of the template Richard is using, right? It's going to be a all-inclusive core book, player information, world information, GM information, bestiary, and 3 adventures.
Yep.
We are going to start off with a certain level of art density, and as the stretch goals unlock, we're going to be increasing the art density for that book as we move forward to just get more art packed into it. We've got a lot of fun ideas, poster maps, doing the end papers of the book so that GMs have inside cover charts that are handy, but not just game effects. We're talking about like naming conventions and things that will help.
Calendars, naming conventions, specifically, there will be tables for things like, well, if you meet an NPC, here's first names, last names, but here's some general ones, and then here's some that are specific to certain locations in the lands around the sea. So the lands around the sea being kind of the setting. And each region, city, things like that. There are names that are distinct enough to a culture that if players hear that name, they think, oh wait, he's from here, right? And there are like political and ethical and sociological ramifications that come with that sort of thing. So.
But there's a second book as well. We're going to be doing a second book, Thunder in the North. You've mentioned it. Give us a quick introduction to Thunder in the North, and then let's talk about some other fun things that we have planned.
So Thunder in the North is the campaign book. It's a grand campaign. If you have watched this Twitch channel, or the associated, I guess all the stuff eventually makes it to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
So if you watched Jam and I and Josh talk about the idea of a grand campaign, something in the vein of like the Great Pendragon campaign or the Darkening of Mirkwood, right? In other words, it's a really long, multi-generational campaign that takes place over multiple in-game years. So the Thunder in the North takes place over 5 in-game years. So there will be 2 adventures provided for each year. Each adventure takes up about a season. So it won't always be like spring and fall, but let's say, one year there's a spring adventure and a fall adventure. Next year there's a winter adventure and a summer adventure, something like that. The idea is, but also it's not just pre-written adventures that you have to follow. It's not a railroad. It's a full sandbox campaign. And the adventures are basically events that let's say if the players do nothing, this is the sequence of events that things will unfold in, but also all of the adventures are keyed to the map so that if players decide to go explore an area sooner than the campaign assumes that they will, as my players actually did. This is a campaign that my group has actually played through.
Because we believe in playtesting the stuff that we put together.
Yes, and it did not. I would just say it did not end anywhere close to the way I thought it was going to end. But so anyway, so basically all the adventures will be key to the location. So it'll be really easy as a lore master to actually move the timeline around as the campaign progresses. And then also, it's going to have more monsters in it. It's going to have some wargaming rules that I've been working on for the Clash system. I had this new mantra that I was actually thinking about, like literally just before we started Zooming. But my mantra is something like, role playing is the highest level of wargaming, and wargaming is the highest level of role playing. In other words, like if you're just like doing, okay, hey, 1,500 points, I'll see you next Wednesday, where that's fine. But the highest level of wargaming would be like an actual campaign with stakes, right? But as is flip that around and say the highest level of role playing would be role playing that involves politics, that has the potential for these mass battles. So Thunder in the North will have mechanics if you're not a wargamer and you just want to resolve the mass battles in kind of a let's say a more abstract method, we've got a thing for that. And then if you actually want to kind of play out the mass battles and what that would look like, we're gonna have a thing for that. we're gonna have and then a really cool, basically liturgical appendix. So for people who don't know, a big element of the world under starlight is the way that the world building is done, which is what I described as world building through poetry or poetic world building. So you could say a lot of times when people sit down to make a fantasy world, they sit down and they write what essentially amount to encyclopedia entries,
Mm-hmm.
right? They sit down and they write, this is who the elves are, and they're descended from, and they went here and they did this at different points in time. It's all fine. And a lot of people think this is actually what, let's say, Tolkien, for instance, did with the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
But what most people don't know is actually Tolkien started with the poetry and the language. And the book that we have as the Silmarillion now is actually just the prose summaries of all the epic poems Tolkien never finished. Well, my goal is to basically finish all the poetry. So basically I do all of my world building by writing poems and songs and hymns and liturgy and prayers about things first. This is the most natural way that actually, historically speaking, this is how people remembered things. This is how wisdom and stories and lore were passed on. So I start out by doing all of that, and then I go back and I write summaries and short stories and all different things. And I try to build this sort of layered effect. So maybe some things get lost from the lower layers to the higher layers, but then they get rediscovered again later on, and so on. And what this means is that the world under starlight has two things that most fantasy worlds try to imply but don't actually have. One is a rich manuscript tradition in which you could say there really are maybe 6 or 7 or 8 different versions of this one story. Which one is true? That is up to actually you as the lore master and the players at the table. That's up for you to explore and figure out during play. The other thing that we have is basically a full liturgical cycle of songs, hymns, services, sacred texts, etc. So Thunder of the North it'll include an appendix, which will basically be, here are some of the liturgical songs and prayers throughout the year. So the idea is, if it was a certain time of year and your players decide to visit a sacred well, which are basically like the shrines or the temples in the setting, they could go there, and the idea is that the lore master, the GM, would have a sample of, this is the kind of stuff they might hear as they walk up to the temple, right? It's not comprehensive, because to actually get everything in there is going to take several volumes. But that's, the plan is that eventually all that stuff is going to be published. And when it comes to publishing just the poetry and the stories of the world, I've been partnering starting last year with a very small press called Darkly Bright Press, and we've been working to publish some of that stuff.
The Aquaretha is out, and
The
one of our
Aquaretha,
early stretch goals is going to be the first book of Odes, which I'm very excited about. We got a lot planned for this Kickstarter, and if you are interested in joining us on this, I'm going to put the link. Let me pull this link up real quick while Richard talks.
We'll put a link somewhere. I don't know how this.
I got it. You can't
thing
do
works.
it because they're like.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll put a link to the Amborea if you just want to know about the world. It's a very slim volume. In fact, I like showing books to webcams. Hold on.
Yeah, we'll definitely put the link to the Aquaretha in the show notes.
So this is a little book called the Aquaretha. Aquaretha is an Amborian word. It means like the founding or the birth of a nation. And the Aquaretha is basically a collection of about 3 works that basically are largely on the theme of the founding of the Amborian civilization. So a lot of the foundational ideas, as you can see, it's quite a slim volume, but a lot of the foundational ideas for the setting you can actually find in here. So if you want to see if this is your kind of thing, you can check that out. Obviously, there is a lot more than just what's in this. I have a lot of the poetry that I finished. I have it bound in a big spiral kind of thing that I printed on Lulu. It's like a phone book. James seen it.
I got a copy.
Yeah, that's right. I did give you a copy. So we're going to be publishing a lot more of this stuff together with Darkly Bright Press. And but one of the stretch goals that I have for this project is an edition of the first book of Odes, which is basically the Amborian Psalter, is the way to think about it. It's the 30 foundational odes or hymns or songs that are basically used throughout the year, and then everything else is kind of built off of that, liturgically speaking. So the first book of odes, what I really like to do is to publish a beautiful hardback, ribbons, nice paper, nice, typesetting, all that stuff, edition of the first book of odes, which would be hopefully enjoyable. And I'm working on the manuscript for that right now because we're going to be publishing a version of it with Darkly by Press. But the idea is, it would be enjoyable as a manuscript just to read and enjoy on your own, especially if you're the kind of person that likes world building stuff. But then also it would be a tremendous player aid if you're playing the game. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be doing a lot more insights into what's going on with Strange Owl, and I'll put in the show notes, go follow Richard's YouTube channel. He is putting out new information on Amboria, and Richard will be talking, you'll definitely be on here when it goes live.
Also, I've even been on the Twitter.
You have been on the Twitter.
I've been on the Twitter, and I'm trying to do like little project updates and like writing process kind of things. So on Twitter, both YouTube and Twitter is just Richard Rowland, my name. You can find me.
We'll make sure to link to all of that in the show notes. And then as you have new, you're going to be doing several interviews with different channels. I'll make sure that I link those on Twitter, retweet them on the Iconic Production channel so that you, if you guys are interested and want to know more. Well, Richard, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to just keep this nice and short, and we'll talk more about Amborea as we have more material. So until,
thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we'll be launching here soon. Hopefully, we'll do a launch party where we talk about it. We'll do. You're also planning to do all of the stretch goal updates in character.
Oh, yes, that's right. So that's actually, if you subscribe to the Strange Owl Patreon, which, as JM mentioned earlier, this is where you can get. You can basically get a quick start. You can get all the basic rules for characters, for pre-generated characters, and an adventure. So like, if you want to see if this is your cup of tea, that adventure is super cool actually, because it's intended to be an introduction for both the lore master and the players to the world and the lore and the tone and the feel of the setting. So I mean, all that stuff is out already on Patreon. So if you just go subscribe, you could run this game tonight if you wanted to. But then for this month's Patreon updates, which I'm going to hopefully finish tonight or tomorrow, we'll have a blog post that will be basically a preview of the first Kickstarter update, which will be, I'm trying to write all of the Kickstarter updates, or at least have a version of them written in character from the perspective of Rinsos. Rinsos the Scribe is a sort of a point of view character for a lot of this legendarium. He is the compiler, you could say, of the Book of Amborea, which is the book that contains most of the lore.
Yeah.
And so we'll be putting the first one of those out on the blog, so you can read that. For the next couple of tiers, we're going to be releasing the hex map. So the paid tiers will be releasing the hex map of the lands around the sea. It's not completed, but basically it'll give you a sense of the kind of game this is going to be. And when you look at it, you're going to realize, sailing might be an important skill in this game. I should definitely spend some points towards sailing, as my players eventually figured out. And then the other paid update for the highest tier is going to be a preview of the rules for magic item creation. These are really cool because I don't like generic magic items in games.
Neither do I.
Even when I run D&D, which of course I do a lot of, especially like old school basic and expert D&D. That's really my flavor. Even then, like I'll roll up magic items, but then I will actually write up the magic item, like this is its name and this is its provenance and all these different things. And so I wanted something that felt really organic to the world under Starlight for these rules. And so we kind of changed or replaced the magic item creation rules and jackals with something that's more specific to this particular setting, where, when you're creating a magic item, you get to, there's like a whole sort of tree of things. And by the time you get to the end of that decision tree, some of which is rolled for randomly, you've got a storied magic item that is actually the kind of thing you could build a story or a character around. as opposed to just something random. Oh, we got a question.
Yeah, I was going to say we have a question from Padre. Out of
Yeah.
curiosity, what rhythm and rhyme structure do you use for the odes?
That is a great question. So, I do the way that I do rhythm and rhyme in Amborian poetry is that I use different rhythmic and rhyme schemes for different kinds of poetry, because the effect that I want it to have for the listener or the reader is that when they read Amborian courtly poetry, which I usually write, if it's courtly poetry or it's something that's a little more modern by Amborian standards, maybe third or fourth aeon, then I'll usually write it in iambic pentameter, which is the the da 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 da, you know, Shakespeare's all
Right.
of Shakespeare's poems, et cetera, et cetera. And then the rhyme scheme will kind of depend. One of the epic poems that is finished and will eventually make it into one of these books, the Lay of Denfeld, is all written in what are called Spenserian stanzas, which was a stanza form of heroic verse popularized by the Elizabethan poet Edmund Spenser.
Yep.
Anything that's going to be really ancient or that is written in deliberate imitation of something ancient, I write in something called trochaic tetrameter.
So like the Kalevala.
Yeah, this is the Kalevala. This is the Kalevala meter, and there are some samples of this kind of poetry actually. Again, if you go to the Patreon, there's a really fun solo adventure.
Yeah.
It's really fun, you guys.
Yeah, it's great. I've played through it several times.
Yeah, but oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the end of the adventure, in the appendices of the adventure, there's some poetry samples. So if you want to look at it, that's a good way to find it. But so yeah, trochaic tetrameter, it's got this lilting kind of a rhythm to it.
Right, isn't Tiger Tiger Burning Bright in the Forest of the Night? Is that trochaic, or am I?
No, that's
that's not it.
But the Song of Hiawatha
there
is
we go.
an example of something written in English in that meter. But also pretty much everything Tom Bombadil says, also a good example. So trochaic tetrameter has this kind of lilting feel, like it's being chanted, and also it's just a little off for English, and so as a result it has this feeling of being kind of weird, a little strange, a little out of time.
Yeah.
And so that's what I use for most of the religious poetry is going to be written in that meter.
Cool.
But even within that meter, there are actually several different kind of sub-metric conventions that I've developed, like chain verse and other things like that, that are specific to different kinds of Amborean liturgical expression. So all that stuff will be in these various books of odes as it comes out.
Well, I was also going to say we had a couple of people who have been mentioning that they are interested in Amborea from the symbolism and the world building side of kind of your presence in the internet, but have never dabbled in role-playing games. There's actually going to be a tier in the Kickstarter where you will get to play Amborea if you back at that tier with Richard as the lore master. We'll set up the stream games and we'll send them, we'll set it up as, we won't stream them. They'll just be online games that you will get to play with Richard. So one last question, is that the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere as well? Ooh, a stumper.
I don't remember. Honestly, I do not remember.
Okay.
It's been a long time since I've read that poem.
We'll follow up with you next time.
If this would be an okay way to end,
yeah, go for it.
Short poem.
Let's do it. Read your poem.
This one is from Amborea. It is one of the 2 hymns of forging. I'm not going to explain any of that. I'm just going to read it. Here we go. Dark beneath the mountain gloomy, in the pale of Orcon's shadow, neath the ancient home of children, neath the seat of Laninomen, on his father's anvil heirloom rang out Senkan's forging hammer. 7 times it smote the anvil, every smiting rang like thunder. 7 times the sparks flew upward, till he 7 sevens numbered. Shining blade of frosty Huarpalb, Filled steel that breath has quickened, straight as yellow sunbeam gleaming, cold as Chaith's gray waters flowing. Did that ancient swordsmith forge it, when the children toiled in darkness? Great Kur-Oru-Peum the shining, blade of ice that azure glistens, still in song, the children name it. When it passed from under darkness, underneath the hated shadow, there on Orkhan's iron doorstep, on the Jade Hill's threshold bitter, smote and slew the fell king's doughty, banished them to blackest torment.
I feel like we should have a stretch goal where everybody just gets digital files of you reading the Akbaritha, and we do a little audio engineering to make it.
And most of those actually exist because I record a lot of the stuff
Yeah, you
for the
do.
kids. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and the children referred to in the poem, that's the Amborai, that's their name for themselves, the children of water and starlight. So
Yeah. I'm looking forward to doing more of these with you, Richard. Not for the least of which I just enjoy talking Amborea with you. Right? It's the same way that I enjoy talking jackals and Zaharets with people. I enjoy listening to other people tell me about their, and I don't even want to say campaign settings, because this is a secondary world. This is a world that you have walked and you have encountered and you have dreamed. And that is something very unique and special. So, all right. Well, until the next time we do one of these, everyone stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming, and we will be back with more Amboria news in the near future. Have a good one.
thanks, everyone.